It's before dawn, September 24th, 1877. You're crouched behind a rock on the slope of Shiroyama, a hill above the city of Kagoshima. Your hands are cold. Somewhere below, more than 20,000 government soldiers are moving into position. 3 days ago, you had thousands of men beside you. Now there are 300. The man near you was once a hero. He helped end 250 years of shogun rule. He sat across from an emperor as an equal. Now his own government has sent an army to kill him. His name is Saigo Takamori. In the next few hours, he will die less than a mile from where he was born. If the name Saigo Takamori sounds unfamiliar, you may already know part of his story secondhand. In 2003, Tom Cruise starred in a film called The Last Samurai, loosely, and often inaccurately, based on this man's life. Forget what the movie showed you. 10 years before Shiroyama, the real Saigo Takamori was the man who saved Japan's capital from burning to the ground. In 1868, imperial forces were closing in on Edo, the shogun's city of over 1 million people. Saigo commanded the army at its gates. Rather than storm the castle, he sat down with an enemy officer named Katsu Kaishu and negotiated its surrender without a single shot fired. Edo, soon to be renamed Tokyo, survived intact because of that one conversation. Saigo became one of the most powerful men in the new Meiji government, a counselor of state at the emperor's side. He had grown up poor in Kagoshima, the son of a low-ranking samurai family, and now he sat where shoguns once did. Then came a disagreement that would end everything. In 1873, the government debated whether to send a punitive mission to Korea. Saigo volunteered to go himself, unarmed, as an envoy. Some historians believe he expected, perhaps even hoped, to be killed there, giving Japan a reason for war. His closest friend since childhood, Okubo Toshimichi, blocked the plan. Outvoted, Saigo resigned every post he held and went home to Kagoshima. He was 45 years old. Within 4 years, the friend who had once negotiated peace for an entire capital would be dead, killed by the government he had helped build. Saigo went home to a Satsuma that no longer resembled the Japan he had helped build. In March 1876, the government issued the Haitorai Edict. For nearly 700 years, the sword had marked a samurai in public. Carrying one, openly at the hip, was the one privilege that separated warrior from farmer. Now it was simply illegal. A soldier of the new conscript army could carry a rifle. A former samurai walking the same street could be arrested for wearing his father's blade. 5 months later came the second blow. The government ended the hereditary stipends that samurai families had lived on for generations, replacing them with government bonds worth a fraction of the original income. Almost overnight, men who had never worked a trade were told to become farmers, merchants, anything, or starve with dignity intact. The anger didn't stay quiet. That same October, several hundred former samurai in Kumamoto, a group called the Shinpurin, attacked a garrison at night armed only with swords, choosing to die rather than live disarmed. Uprisings followed in Akizuki and Hagi within days. All three were crushed within a week. In Kagoshima, thousands of former samurai watched these revolts fail one after another and waited. They still had a leader. He was farming quietly on his family's land, saying almost nothing about politics. But 6,000 of the angriest, most idle young men in the region were about to make that silence impossible to keep. You're standing on an ordinary street in modern Kagoshima. Nothing looks unusual until you notice the stone wall beside you. It's pitted with dozens of small, round scars, still visible after nearly 150 years. This is what remains of the Shigakko, Saigo's private school. He founded it in 1874, not as a rebellion, but almost as a favor. He built it on the ruins of the old stables of Tsurumaru Castle, the domain's own castle, now stripped of its lord and its purpose, just like the men Saigo was trying to give something to do. Thousands of former samurai in Satsuma had no army to serve, no stipend to live on, and no trade to fall back on. Saigo gave them somewhere to go, a curriculum mixing Confucian classics with military drill, spreading within a couple of years into more than 100 branch schools across the region. By 1876, its graduates effectively ran the local government. It wasn't meant to become a weapon, but 6,000 restless young men with military training and nothing to lose are hard to keep calm forever. In January 1877, the central government, worried about exactly this, sent ships to quietly remove gunpowder and weapons from Kagoshima's arsenal before anyone could use them. Students from the Shigakko found out. Before dawn, they broke into the depot themselves and hauled the weapons away first. When Saigo heard what his own students had done, he didn't celebrate. According to several accounts, his only reaction was one word: Shimata. I've ruined it. He hadn't ordered the raid, but the government would treat it as an act of war regardless of who gave the order, and Saigo knew there was no way to undo it now. On February 15th, 1877, Saigo marched north out of Kagoshima at the head of roughly 13,000 men. Officially, they weren't rebels. They were petitioners, marching to Tokyo to ask the government some questions. Nobody involved believed that framing would last long. Their first obstacle was Kumamoto Castle, one of Japan's strongest fortresses, held by a much smaller garrison. Saigo's forces surrounded it, expecting a quick surrender. The castle held. While they were pinned down outside its walls, government reinforcements landed by sea and raced to break the siege, funneling straight through a narrow ridge of hills called Tabaruzaka. What followed is remembered as the bloodiest 17 days of 19th century Japan. Rain turned the hillside to deep mud. Both sides burned through their ammunition so fast that soldiers were reduced to fighting hand to hand, swords against swords, in some of the last true samurai combat Japan would ever see. The government, short on experienced swordsmen of its own, formed a special police unit called the Batatai, recruiting former samurai from the losing side of an earlier civil war just to match Satsuma's blades. By the time Tabaruzaka fell silent in late March, some historians estimate more than 4,000 men had died on that one ridge alone, though exact figures are still debated. The government's numbers, supply lines, and modern rifles had worn Saigo's army down. Kumamoto's siege broke. For the first time since leaving home, Saigo's forces were retreating, not advancing. What followed Tabaruzaka wasn't a single battle, but a 4-month retreat across the mountains of Kyushu. Saigo's army, once 13,000 strong, was hunted the entire way, through Hitoyoshi, through Miyazaki, always moving, always losing men to death, capture, or quiet desertion. By August, cornered near Mount Enodake with government forces closing in on every side, Saigo did something almost no commander in his position does. He gathered what remained of his army and released them. Anyone who wanted to surrender could walk away without shame. Only those who chose to stay would go on with him. Most walked away. What was left, by some accounts as few as 300 or 400 men, broke through the encirclement under cover of night and began the long trek home. On September 1st, 1877, they reached Kagoshima and climbed the hill above the city they knew best, Shiroyama, the same hill where this story began. You duck your head and step through a narrow opening carved into the rock. Inside, the cave is barely large enough to stand in. This is where Saigo Takamori spent his final 5 days. By mid-September, government forces had sealed off every route out of Kagoshima. 60,000 troops surrounded a few hundred men. Officers on the government side, some of whom had served under Saigo years earlier, sent messages urging him to surrender, offering him a chance to live. He never replied. Inside this cave, by lantern light, Saigo spent his evenings with his remaining officers, among them his old friend and second-in-command, Kirino Toshiaki. They didn't discuss victory. There was no path to victory left. What they discussed, according to accounts passed down afterward, was how to die in a way that meant something, one final charge in the open rather than waiting to be starved out underground. Outside, the shelling continued day and night. Government warships in the bay added their own cannon fire to the siege. And yet visitors to this cave today describe something unexpected. Not despair, but quiet. Whatever fear these men carried, they kept it to themselves. On the morning of September 24th, Saigo walked out of this cave for the last time. At 4 in the morning on September 24th, 1877, government cannon fire signaled the final assault. 60,000 troops closed in from every direction on fewer than 400 men. Saigo and his remaining officers didn't wait to be overrun. They charged downhill toward the city, toward the guns. It wasn't a battle they could win. It was a battle they chose to end on their own terms. Partway down the slope, near a place called Iwasaki-guchi, a bullet struck Saigo in the hip and another in the thigh. He couldn't continue. According to accounts passed down by those who survived, he turned to Beppu Shinsuke, a young officer who had served him for years, and said only, "Shinsuke, this will do." What happened next? Historians still debate in its exact details. Some question whether Saigo even spoke those final words at all. But the outcome is not in dispute. Beppu carried out his commander's final request. Saigo Takamori died there, on the slope of the hill where he had once given 6,000 idle young men something to believe in. The men who remained didn't surrender. They kept charging until almost none of them were left standing. By 7 that morning, the government's flag flew over Shiroyama, and the age of the samurai, nearly 700 years old, was over. Today, a short walk from where he fell, Saigo Takamori is buried at Nanshu Cemetery, alongside more than 2,000 men who died fighting beside him, including Beppu Shinsuke and Kirino Toshiaki. Every September 24th, descendants and admirers still gather at the adjoining Nanshu Shrine to mark the anniversary of his death. The government that killed him didn't erase him. Within a decade, Saigo was posthumously pardoned, and today he's remembered less as a traitor than as the last man willing to die for a way of life Japan had already decided to leave behind. His old friend Okubo Toshimichi, the man who had blocked his mission to Korea and helped crush this very rebellion, didn't outlive him by long. Less than 8 months later, Okubo was assassinated on a Tokyo street by a group of former samurai, several of whom cited Saigo's death as one of their reasons. The two men who had once negotiated the peaceful surrender of an entire capital together were both gone within a year of each other. There's one more scar left to see. At Tsurumaru Castle, the same castle whose old stables became Saigo's private school, the stone walls surrounding the grounds are still pockmarked with bullet holes from this final siege. The castle that once housed the lords of Satsuma had become, by 1877, a government defensive position, caught in the same war its own former retainers had started. Kagoshima never tried to hide this history. In the city center today stands a bronze statue of Saigo Takamori, built in 1937, gazing out over the streets he once commanded. Unlike Tokyo's more famous statue of him in hunting clothes with his dog, this one shows him in the military uniform he actually wore as a leader, a small but deliberate correction made by the city that knew him best. The samurai class Saigo tried to save didn't survive the century, but the man who led its final stand became something the government that killed him never managed to become, impossible to forget. You started this story crouched behind a rock, watching an army close in on a man you didn't yet know. Now you know why 20,000 soldiers were sent to kill 300. You know why a man who once saved a capital chose to die defending a way of life everyone else had already agreed to abandon. Was Saigo Takamori a traitor to the government he helped build, or the last man honest enough to keep his word to the people who trusted him? Historians in Japan still argue both sides. Maybe after everything you've just seen, you have your own answer. If you want more stories like this one, real places you can still visit, real history behind the legends, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.